So this is going to be a tutorial that covers the continuous movement as well as teleportation. But I thought given the past tutorials and maybe the confusion over setting up the XR rig that I would try to go through this as seamlessly and directly as possible. So let's go ahead and get started. And we are going to first add an XR rig. So right click in your hierarchy, come down to XR and click XR origin. You can see that it adds an XR interaction manager and the origin. Let's go ahead and expand this out. And the first thing that we want to do is we want to come over and we want to set our tracking origin to floor. The next thing we want to do is add a character controller. And we're going to set our character controller to a center of 0.5, a radius of 0.1, and a height of 1. Okay. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to come over to our left controller and we're going to go ahead and add in the left controller default. And our right controller. And again, you can hit this little settings button to find those. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we are going to add an empty game object on our XR origin. And we are going to call this our locomotion system. And then we're going to come over and hit add component, locomotion, and hit locomotion system. We're going to drag our XR origin into our locomotion system. And then we're going to create a couple more empty game objects. So the first one we're going to call move. The next one we're going to call turn. And then the next one we're going to call teleport. Now, on our move component, we're going to hit add, and we're going to select dynamic move provider. We are going to take our locomotion system, drag that in there. We're going to set the movement speed to 1.5. We're going to leave strafe and gravity on, and we're going to switch this to immediately. This setting's very important. It tells the system to apply gravity as soon as the game starts, regardless of whether or not we're moving. This will be important later when we add our character controller and the character controller driver to the XR origin. For the forward source, we're going to have the main camera because we want to move forward where our camera is looking. And then the movement direction down below, we're going to drag the main camera for the head transform, the left controller to the left controller transform, the right controller to the right controller transform. Now, on the dynamic move provider, we need to set up the left hand move action because that's the left thumbstick. So you're going to hit use reference. You're going to hit this button right there. And then you're going to come find locomotion, like left hand locomotion move. And we're going to double click that. And so now that should have our dynamic motion set up on our left controller. On the turn, we're going to go ahead and add continuous turn provider action based. We're going to go ahead and drag our locomotion system on there. And then this time we're going to turn on the right hand turn action. Hit this little circle button. And then we're going to come down to the right hand locomotion. We're going to find turn. So that's all set up. And then on teleport, we're going to hit add component, teleport provider. And then we're going to drag the locomotion system onto that. Now we're going to come over to the XR origin, and we already added the character controller, but now what we want to do is we're going to add something called a character controller driver. And what this will do is allow the height of our character control to adjust based on the height of the headset. And the way we do that is we're going to provide this locomotion provider, and we're going to provide it the dynamic move provider. So if you remember, we have this dynamic move provider. So that's what we're dragging onto the origin here. So again, you're going to click move. You're going to click on this. You're going to click and hold move, and you're going to drag this down here. And if we've set all of this up correctly, then our character should move in the scene, and our headset should be tracked, and we should have continuous movement available to us. So I'm going to just see that the headset is tracking first, and then we'll continue here. So I'm going to hit play, and looks like the headset is moving. And then I'll switch over to the scene, and you can see that as I move my headset, the little capsule collider, right, is moving as well. So as I move up and down and rotate, move around, my capsule collider is moving appropriately. All right, so we're almost there. The only other thing I want to show you guys how to do really quickly that I thought might also simplify sort of just setting up your XR rigging character and doing the continuous move is if we come down to our XR interaction toolkit samples and we look at the controllers, you can see that there's a left controller and a right controller prefab. And in doing some additional investigation on this, I found that what we can do is we can take the Oculus controllers that we downloaded, and let me find where I put those. Okay, so we can come down here, and then we come to the Quest 2 controllers, and you'll see that we have um, the different versions. This is like the high resolution, this is like medium, and this is low. So what we're going to do real quick is we're going to make our own prefab of these controllers. So go ahead and grab the high resolution controllers, drag them into your scene, and then we're going to right click on the prefab, and we're going to tell it to unpack completely. When we do that, you'll see that we have all of our models for the left and right hand controller. Now what we're going to do next is we are going to create an empty game object on this. I'm going to create two of them actually, and I want you to call it left controller. And then we'll make one called right controller. And then we can go ahead and drag these into the left, drag these into the right. And then in your prefabs folder that you should have created, we can create another folder. And what I want you to do is collapse these. And actually, let's rename them real quick, just so that you have the same name as I have. Call this Quest 2 left controller and Quest 2 right controller. Now click on both of these, and I want you to drag it into the controller folder that you just created. And when you do that, what it'll do is it'll create two prefabs. Now, once you've created your prefabs, go ahead and delete the Quest 2 controller that you dragged in. And let's come back over to our XR origin and click on our left controller. And let's scroll down to the bottom here. And you'll see there's this model prefab and model parent. What we're going to do is we're going to go back into that controllers folder that you just created where you just dropped those prefabs. And I want you to drag the left controller onto here. and then I want you to drag the left controller where that's attached to our XR rig there. And then on the right controller, I want you to drag the right control onto the model, and I want you to grab the right controller from our XR origin and drag it to the transform. And if we've done that correctly, then when we turn the headset back on and hold the controllers in front of us, we should see those control models automatically in the scene without us necessarily having to add them in like we did in the previous tutorials. All right, and there you go. You can see now that the model is automatically getting pulled in from your prefabs folder, um, so that the controller is automatically associated with your left and right hand controller. Now you can do the same thing when you add in things like maybe a hand model or some other object to represent the track controllers. Okay, let's also just quickly take a look and make sure that our snap turn, or I'm sorry, our continuous turn and continuous movement functionalities are working. So we should have already set those up. Remember, we set up the dynamic movement and we set up the turn. So let's go ahead and give that a try real quick. All right, so I'm moving the right thumbstick, and you can see that turn is working. And now I move forward on the left thumbstick, and you can see that forward, backward, and left strafe are working. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's go ahead and we will move on to teleportation. When setting up our teleportation, there's a couple of different ways we can do this. And I'm going to close out my prefabs folder here, and I'm going to come down to the XR Interaction Toolkit and our prefabs for teleport. And let's see, that's the wrong folder. Let's come into the prefabs on the demo scene and click teleport. And you'll see that there are 3 different types of teleporting. There's snapping teleport, teleport anchor, and teleport area. Now, these are examples. We're not going to drag these in. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to use the environment we already have, and we're going to create our own teleportation areas. So when we added in the left and right hand controller, the teleportation actions were already included, and you can see that we have a XR Ray interactor, a line renderer, an XR interaction line visual. And when we expand these, you can see that we have a bunch of different settings. And the first thing that we can do is change the line type from straight line to projectile curve. So let's do that to both of them for your left and right controller. And then as we kind of come down, we can see that we have a bunch of other settings. We could probably leave all of those alone for right now. Later on, we can get into kind of how to modify and maybe adjust these. But for right now, I think the defaults are probably okay. And as we continue to look at the settings, most of these look fine. And then we have the interactor color. And so this is where you can change or play around with maybe how you want the visual to look. Right now, basically, if we are pointing this X-ray interactor at something that can be grabbed or teleported to, it's going to show white. I think maybe it would be better if it was like some kind of a green color maybe. So I'm going to go ahead and change that. And we'll go ahead and Actually, what we can do is if we select both the left and the right controller, we can change both of them to the same color at the same time. So let's go ahead and do that. And let's pick like this kind of soft green color. All right, cool. So we got that. And then you'll also notice that there is an option for a reticle and blocked reticle. So let's come into the XR Interaction Toolkit again and click on Teleport. And then there's two prefabs in here that we're going to borrow. So we're going to use this blocked teleport reticle and the reticle. All right. And now the next thing we need to do is we need to set up our teleportation area. And so I've got a ground plane here, in my scene that represents the ground outside. And then I can also, if I come into the scene here, I can find the floor inside of my factory. So let's set up the floor of my factory to be a place where I can teleport. So let's see here. I believe the floor is here. And what we're going to do is we're going to hit Add Component, start typing Teleport, and we're going to choose Teleport Area. And you can see that we have a bunch of different settings in here. Now, the most important setting we need to add is to come and select this interaction layer mask. And we need to set this to teleport. And when you click on that, it may set to everything, but we want to disable default. We just only want the teleport. And the other thing that is important is if for some reason this isn't showing up, what you need to do is you need to hit Add Layer and come over to Interaction Layers, click on this, and come all the way down to layer 31 and type in teleport. And it is case sensitive, so make sure you capitalize the T. We want to have this set up. That's what the XR or toolkit is looking for. If you don't use layer 31, it won't work properly. So please make sure that that's working. Now let's go back to our floor and we can make a couple other, we can look at a couple other options. So we want to go ahead and match the world space. So that will, teleport us based on the orientation of our custom reticle. And let's go ahead and just give this a try and make sure that this works. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play and, one setting that I need to do is this teleportation provider. So let's come back over here. So we have the teleport. We're going to drag that onto teleport provider. There we go. And now we should be pretty much good to go. So I think it should allow us to teleport around. So let's give that a try. All right, so now when I'm looking around, you can see that I've got these two sort of teleport capabilities pointing around. And then if I hit the trigger on the inside of the controller, not the front trigger, the inside trigger, I can jump to a location inside my factory. And if you hold down the trigger, and then I believe, maybe it's not set up yet. I think there's a way to get the reticle to rotate. So we'll try and maybe add that in here in a follow-on tutorial. But for right now, just being able to kind of zip around the environment is pretty useful. You can see I also set up a teleport area outside of my factory here. And now I can, use the teleportation to, quickly jump myself around the world. Okay, so now what we're going to focus on is implementing the teleport anchor. So the area is for like large terrain, but the anchor is when you want to teleport to an object. So what we're going to do is create an empty game object, and we're going to call this the snapping teleport. And we're going to go ahead and create another empty game object underneath of it called anchor. And now we're going to create a 3D object. Let's pick a cylinder. And go ahead and set it to, a value that is, reasonably thin. We could try to do like 0.03. That probably would be a little bit better than that. Now we also need to remove the capsule collider. And instead we're going to use a mesh collider. And select the checkbox or the convex. And I think we should be good there. And now we need to create an empty game object. And let's call this snap volume. And you can see that our object is sort of floating. So let's go ahead and set that to 0. And then let's also check that the cylinder's position is half of its height. So 0.015. All right, now our cylinder's laying flat on the floor like we want. And let's go ahead and move our anchor point up to 0.05, so just slightly above the height of our cylinder. And then let's go back into our snap volume. And we're going to add the XR interactable snap volume. And you can see that we still need to add a couple of different things. So let's go ahead and add a box collider. And let's set that to 1.25, 1.25, and let's see, maybe about like an 8, or I'm sorry, 0.6 and 0.3 on the center. So that gives us a box kind of just slightly bigger than the cylinder. Now we also need to add the teleportation anchor. Set that to teleport. And we need that to be the up and forward setting. And then we need to add our teleport provider. And we also need to update our anchor point. So we can go ahead and do that as well. So now we're going to drag our snap teleport object into our interactable. And you can see that we still have an error, so it's looking for us to set the is trigger on our box collider, and that should take the error away. And you can see what should happen is, as the Ray interactor gets close to that green box, should snap the Ray interactor to the center of our teleporter. So let me grab my controllers here. You can see already it's doing its job. So as I move closer to the object, it snaps into it and locks it in place so that when you click, you can easily snap to that location. So this is kind of a useful technique, especially if you've got like multiple objects in the room and you really need to, help the user lock onto the to the teleporter. It's also useful as a concept for grabbable objects as well. So we'll be, reusing this technique as we move on onto some of the selectable and interactive stuff. So let's go ahead and create a regular teleporter now. And we're going to repeat much of the same process. And we're going to add an empty game object, call it anchor, and set that up like we did last time. And then we'll go ahead and we will add the teleport anchor again. Drag our new anchor onto it. Set it to up and forward. And then grab our locomotion provider. And now we're going to go ahead and create another cylinder like we did before. And just go ahead and repeat the same settings as last time. And now this time it's a little bit simpler since we aren't doing the snapping, so we just need to remove the capsule collider, replace it with the mesh collider. But we don't need to add the snap volume. We just need to set up the mesh, and now we can go ahead and test to see if that is working. All right, let's see here. And when I point, at the walls and stuff, it doesn't activate. When I point at the snap, it snaps. And you can see as I get closer to the other anchor point, it doesn't snap. So again, you kind of need to decide whether or not, snapping is or isn't appropriate for what you're trying to do. Generally speaking, I would say snapping is probably a better option. But you may not want that. You may want the user to, purposely aim their teleport ray to a specific location, because maybe you don't want them to inadvertently get stuck on an object or to teleport to one that they don't mean to. Now, the other thing we can do with the anchor point is actually rotate the anchor point. And that'll determine what direction we're looking after the teleport happens. So beforehand, we were looking at the wall kind of in the direction of the box conveyor, and now we'll be looking at the wall to the right of our teleportation area. So let's give that a try. So you think of the anchor point as sort of telling the system like what location and orientation I really want the teleportation to do. So you can see now it's snapping me to the wall. All right, so there's one last thing we can go ahead and try to do, and that's going to be to add a teleportation to an object. So, perhaps I want my user to interact with this box in my factory. And if I were to add the teleportation anchor directly to the box, it would cause me to teleport inside of the box. So what we're going to do is we're going to add the teleport anchor, but then we're going to set it up just like we did with the others. But then when we go to create the anchor for the box, we'll adjust that so that the user teleports in front of the box, not inside of the box. And we'll do that using the same empty game object anchor that we added to the previous teleport locations. So make sure you get all the settings set up correctly, just like last time. And then go ahead and click back on your box or whatever object you're using in lieu of it. And then we'll type in anchor. And now what we're going to do is we're going to drag that anchor point onto our teleportation anchor. And then we're going to drag it off of the box, and we're going to lower it down toward the ground, just above the ground there. And then we're also going to rotate it 90 degrees so that it's facing the cardboard box. And so now when I point my Ray interactor at the box and click teleport, it will snap me in front of the box where I can interact with it. And there you go. So as you can see, when I click on the box, it places me in front of it, facing toward it, so that, again, I can interact with that box if I wanted to. So there you go. That's pretty much teleportation. There's still a little bit that we probably want to do to clean up the experience, but in general, that should be enough to get you started. I'll probably do a follow-on tutorial in regards to just sort of cleaning up the experience, particularly when it comes to the reticle. So if you have any questions, just let me know.